Hello everyone. Today we are going to discuss the second part of the chapter number 3, that is presentation of financial statements. The second part of this uh, chapter is allocated for the accounting policies, changes in accounting estimates and errors. Basically, this topic is based on the LKAS 8 accounting standard, accounting policies, changes in accounting estimates and errors. The learning outcomes, first you should be able to describe the accounting treatment for the changes in accounting policies, accounting estimates and errors. If an entity changes its accounting policy, so how do you account for that? If an entity changes the accounting estimates, how do you account for that? And if you find prior period errors, right, how do you rectify these errors? So you should be able to describe as well as compute the relevant adjustments relating to the changes in accounting policies, accounting estimates and errors. And then we will be discussing the events after reporting period, right? So in that case, you should be able to explain the events after reporting periods and their implications to the financial statements. Accordingly, the lesson outline for the today's session is this. That is, the first one is accounting policies, changes in accounting estimates and errors based on the LKAS 8 accounting standard. And number 2 is events after reporting period based on LKAS 10. Let's get into the first one. So we come to the accounting policies. The question is, why accounting policies? Why we need accounting policies? ගිණුම් කරන ප්‍රතිපත්ති අවශ්‍ය වෙන්නේ ඇයි? Let's think in this way. If we don't have accounting policies, what will happen? Accounting policies තිබුණ නැත්නම් මොකක් වේවිද? Okay. Now, if there are no accounting policies, what will happen? Different entities will prepare their financial statements in different ways. Okay, different entities will prepare financial statements on their own method in different ways. Then what happens? These financial statements are different to each other, right? They are not consistent, right? To each other. එකිනෙකට consistent සංගත වෙන්නේ නැහැ. So as a consequence, what will happen? We can't compare the financial statements of similar entities. In other words, the comparability is not there. Right? අපිට සංසන්දනය කරන්න බෑ. මොකද different entities have prepared the financial statements in different ways. So if you take that angle, like if we don't have accounting policies, what are the implications? Then you will understand why accounting policies are needed. Okay, simply lamai, if accounting policies are there, that they are the guidelines to prepare the financial statements, therefore entities will follow these guidelines, common guidelines, in preparation and presentation of their financial statements, right? If they follow these common guidelines, what will happen? The financial statements of different entities will look similar. Okay, will look similar, එක වගේ පෙනේ, right? So what happens if they are similar? I mean, if they use the same set of accounting policies or common accounting policies, what will happen? The comparability is there. We can compare financial statements in different entities. Now, if you can remember the conceptual framework, there you saw a qualitative characteristic, which is an enhancing characteristic relevant to the comparability, right? So the information presented should be comparable. Okay, then only the decision usefulness is there. Decision එකට useful වෙන නම් ඒ information comparable වෙන්න ඕනේ. නිසා අපිට clear accounting policies අවශ්‍ය වෙන්නේ common guidelines දුන්නාම financial statements prepare කරන්න සහ present කරන්න හැමෝම එක framework එක ඒ financial statements හදයි. එතකොට consistent සංගත වෙනවා සහ comparable compare කරන්න පුළුවන්. Okay, now as per the LKAS 8, accounting policies are defined as specific principles. Specific principles, right? Bases, conventions, rules, practices. What are the accounting policies? Specific principles. විශේෂිත මූලධර්ම. Bases, ඒ කියන්නේ පදනම්. Conventions, ඒ කියන්නේ සම්මතයන්. Rules, රීතීන්. Practices, භාවිතයන්. Okay, applied by an entity in preparing and presenting financial statements. In other words, lamai, when an entity prepare and present its financial statements, okay, they have to use specific principles, bases, conventions, rules and practices. Okay, they have to apply these things. So these specific principles, bases, conventions, rules and practices are called as accounting policies. මූල්‍ය ප්‍රකාශන හදනකොට ඒ මූල්‍ය ප්‍රකාශන හදන්න යොදා ගන්න භාවිත කරන නිශ්චිත මූලධර්ම, පදනම්, සම්මතයන්, රීති, භාවිතයන් ආදියට අපි කියනවා මොනවද? ගිණුම් කරන ප්‍රතිපත්ති කියලා. Okay, we'll take few examples, but before that, now accounting policies are applied in recognition and measurement and presentation of transactions and events. When a transaction is recognized, we apply accounting policies. When a transaction is measured, we apply accounting policies. Okay, when transactions are presented in financial statements, we apply or use accounting policies. Okay, one example is if I take recognition. Now if you can remember the leasing standard, now the new standard for leasing is SLFRS 16. As per the leasing standard, the lease liability is recognized. Okay, example, lease liability is recognized at the present value of lease payments. At the present value of lease payment. Okay, at the time of the agreement එක සිදු වන දවසේ lease liability is recognized at the present value of the lease payment at the time of the agreement. එතකොට ඒක policy එකක්, accounting policy එකක්. lease liability එක ඒ agreement එකට lessor සහ lessee enter වෙච්ච දවසේ අපි recognize කරනවා lease payments වල present value එකට. Another example, income recognition policies. Number 2, income recognition accounting policies. Now, there is an accounting standard called SLFR 15, revenue from contract with customers. Now, that standard is applied to the revenue. Okay, but when it comes to a specific or particular entity, they may have to have their own set of accounting policies. Okay, so how do they recognize the income? What is the accounting policy? Income recognition policy, right? And the second one is, I told you, accounting policies are applied to the measurement, right? One example is measurement. Now, to value the stocks, you can use as per LKAS2, as per the standard, you can use FIFO weighted average method, right? Example, as per LKAS2, to value stocks, FIFO WAC, weighted average cost method can be used. Okay, now as per the LKAS2 accounting standard for stocks or the inventory, to value the stocks you can use either FIFO or weighted average method, right? So it is a measurement to value, to measure the inventory. Okay, another example for that is as per LKAS 16, as per LKAS 16, that is PPE, right? PPE, property, plant and equipment, can be subsequently measured using either cost model or evaluation model. Okay, ඔයාලට මතක ඇති LKS 16ට අනුව දේපල පිරිත් උපකරණ ආයතනයක් පසු කාලීනව මිනුම්කරණය කරනකොට සබ්සීක්වන්ට් මෙෂර්මන්ට් එකේදී ඔයාලට යූස් කරන්න පුළුවන් කොස්ට් මොඩල් එක හෝ රීවැලුවේෂන් මොඩල් එක. ඒ දෙකෙන් එකක්. අන්න මෙෂර්මන්ට් එකට සම්බන්ධ වෙනවා accounting policy එකක්. හරි? ඒ වගේම ඉන්වෙන්ටරි වල තියෙනවා අර cost or net realizable value whichever is lower. That is the stock rule, right? When you value the stock, you can use the cost or net realizable value, whichever is low. Okay, now all these accounting policies apply to the measurement. Earlier accounting policies were applied to the recognition. I mean the early example, this time I took the measurement. Okay, and then the presentation. Now we saw in the previous session, we can classify expenses in the income statement based on the nature or based on the function. Okay, so one example, classify expenses based on nature or function. One entity can choose the nature-based classification, whereas another entity can choose function-based classification. If we ask, why did you select nature-based classification from the earlier or the former company, that company will say that is our accounting policy. If we ask, why do you select function-based classification from the later company, they will say that is our accounting policy, right? So you can see that accounting policy is applied to the presentation. තවත් එකක් මතක තියාගන්න පුළුවන් තවත් example එකක්. Now as per the leasing, right? So I will tell it, but I don't write it here. As per the leasing standard, right? Now the leasing asset is called as right of use asset. Lease asset is called as right of use asset, right? Now when you present that right of use asset in the statement of financial position, right, you can take that item to the property, plant and equipment, right? Right of use asset can be taken to the property, plant and equipment, right? And that can be included in the carrying value of the property, plant and equipment. Okay, then in the phase of the statement of financial position, you have only one, you have only property, plant and equipment line item. හරි මම කිව්වේ right of use asset එක PPE වලම carrying amount එකේ include කරලා අපිට statement of financial position එකට ගේන්න පුළුවන්. හරි මම ඒක ලිව්වොත් එහෙම තවත් එකක් පැහැදිලි වෙන්න. Now this is our statement of financial position. So let's take PPE table. Okay, this is PPE. So we have land, buildings and other freehold asset. If we have a lease asset that is called as right of use asset, we can include that in the PPE itself, right of use asset. Okay, so what happens if we include right of use asset in the PPE? Ultimately we take the carrying amount of the PPE. Okay, we take the carrying amount of all these assets and we take the total of the carrying amount that goes to the PPE under, that goes to the statement of financial position in the caption of PPE. On a presentation alternative එකක්. මම නැවත කිව්වොත් right of use asset එක you can include in the carrying amount of the PPE, then it will go to the statement of financial position under the caption of property, plant and equipment. Alternatively, you can use a separate line item. Okay, in the SOFP, that is statement of financial position, you can take PPE separately and right of use asset separately, right? So it is clear in the earlier case the right of use asset is included in the carrying amount of PPE, right? Therefore we see a single line item here, but as an alternative you can have another line item in the statement of financial position, that is right of use asset, separately from PPE to incorporate the right of use asset in the leasing transaction. Okay, so these are presentation alternatives. So one company can select first method, whereas another company can select second method. Okay, so if we ask from the first company, why did you select the presentation method, they will say that is our accounting policy. And if we ask from the later company, second company, why did you select this method of presentation, they will say this is our accounting policy. Okay, therefore it is clear that accounting policies are applied to the recognition, measurement and presentation of transactions and events. Okay, if we summarize, now I told you that accounting policies are required or needed. Why? To have a consistency in financial statements. If so, the comparability is there. Okay, ultimately what will happen, the decision usefulness will be increased. Okay, so then we defined accounting policies as specific principles, bases, conventions, rules, and practices applied by an entity when preparing and presenting financial statements. Okay, and I told you then the accounting policies are applied to recognition, like income recognition policies, lease liability recognition policy, right? And the measurement, second one is measurement. When you measure transaction or event, you can apply accounting policies, like to value the inventory or to subsequently measure the property, plant, and equipment. Okay, and lastly, accounting policies are applied to presentations. Okay, we saw that expenses in the income statement can be presented using nature-based classification or function-based classification. So you can select one. As well as we saw that as per the leasing standard, we can uh, include the right of use asset in the PPE itself. Okay, or else we can take right of use asset separately to the statement of financial position, right? So they are presentation related policies. And also Lamai, accounting policies may be developed by entities by looking at the industry related requirements. Now, say for example, in plantation companies, they may select or they may develop accounting policies to be suitable to their particular industry, plantation industry. Of course, there are particular accounting standards focusing on that industry uh, itself, but those accounting policies can be selected or developed by the entity as well. I will talk it about little later, but I think that the basic knowledge on the accounting policies is there. So let's go to the next one. So I have taken few accounting policies from the John Keel's annual report. I showed you the John Keel's annual reports extracts last session. So these are the summary of significant accounting policies. Okay, so as per their annual report, they say these accounting policies are applied to the group as well as the individual entity. Okay, so see the revenue accounting policy. The revenue එක recognize කරන accounting policy එක මොකක්ද? Okay, now if I read the sentence, now these are extracts of the John Keel's PLC annual report. Revenue from contract with customers. Now see, revenue from contract with customers is recognized when control of the goods or services is transferred to the customer at an amount that reflect the consideration to which the group expects to entitled in exchange for those goods or services. බලන්න recognize කරක් තියෙන නේද? Income එක recognize කරන්න මොන මොහොතේද? When the control is transferred from the seller to buyer. Simply. Right? So this accounting policy relevant to the revenue is centered around the recognition of revenue, right? We'll take another example. Net finance income, ඒ කියන්නේ ශුද්ධ මූල්‍ය ආදායම. Okay, so this is about the measurement, how this particular company, John Keel's company, measure the net finance income. This is measurement, or even it could be recognition. Okay, how do they recognize and how do they measure, right? Then another one, this is bit familiar to you, accounting policy relating to the property, plant and equipment. Basis of recognition, see, recognition policy. In which situation you recognize the PPE when it is probable that future economic benefits associated with the asset will flow to the group and cost of the asset can be reliably measured. On recognition කරන policy එක දීලා තියෙනවා when there is a probable future economic benefits and when the cost can be measured reliably, the PPE is recognized as well as the measurement, right? So it says cost less initially at the cost, subsequently cost less accumulated depreciation and accumulated impairment loss measurement. අපි ඔය PPE කතා කරනවා මේ syllabus එකේ measurement එක. ඒතර clear accounting policies කියන ඒවා recognition එකේදී measurement වලදී presentations වලදී apply කරනවා. Okay, we'll go to the next slide. How to decide the accounting policy for an entity. Now lamai usually there are accounting standards to specify the accounting treatments for transactions. Okay, transactions සඳහා accounting treatment එක specify කරන්න accounting standards තියෙනවා. Right? Say for example, for inventory related transactions we have LKAS 2. Inventory LKAS 2. PPE related transactions we have LKAS 16. Okay, leasing related transactions we have SLFRS 16. Revenue related transactions we have SLFRS 50. Likewise lamai for transactions and events there are accounting standards which prescribe the accounting treatments. Okay, now if there is an accounting standard relevant to a particular type of transactions, right, the accounting policy related to that type of transaction can be selected by reference to the or by taking the guidelines of the relevant accounting standard. If I say it again, if there is an accounting standard to govern the accounting treatment of particular transaction or event, the accounting policy relating to that transaction or event can be selected or should be selected, right, based on that accounting standard. මම එක සිංහලෙන් කිව්වොත් එහෙම යම්කිසි ගනුදෙනු වර්ගයකට ගිණුම් කරන ප්‍රමිතියක් තියෙනවා නම් ඒ ගනුදෙනු වර්ගයට අදාළ ගිණුම් කරන ප්‍රතිපත්තිය ඒ accounting standard එකේ තියෙන නිර්දේශ කිරීම වලට අනුව තමයි තෝරගන්න වෙන්නේ. Now say for example, inventory there is the standard is LKAS 2. So as per the LKAS 2 you can use FIFO or weighted average cost method to value the stock. හරි, ඒව තමයි නිර්දේශ කිරීම දෙන්නේ LKAS 2 වල. හරි, LKAS 16 වල subsequent measurement වලදී subsequent measurement එකේදී you can use cost model or revaluation model. Right? එනම් බලන්න, when an accounting standard specifically applies to a transaction or an event, the accounting policy or policies applied to that item shall be determined by the applying accounting standard. I think that is clear. In summary, if there is an accounting standard to a particular type of transactions, right? uh, when you select the accounting policy relating to that transaction or event, you have to look at, or you have to take the guidelines of the accounting standard. Okay, based on the guidelines of the said accounting standard, you can select the accounting policy. ඔන්න select කරන විදිය. Now, in the absence of a particular accounting standard to a particular set of transaction, right? So how do we select, or how do we decide the accounting policy? Then currently uh, almost to capture almost all the transactions, we have accounting standards. කොහොම වගේ transactions capture කරන්න accounting standards තියෙනවා. හරි. හැබැයි ළමයි, due to the changes in the environment, now actually classic example is the environment uncertainty, or the environment that we are facing now due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Okay, now the environment is so dynamic, right? Environment changes based on the technological changes, based on the unexpected incidents such as COVID-19, right? So in this case, the accounting policies prescribed or specified by the accounting standards may not be relevant to the entity being considered. අපි සලකා බලන entity එකට ඔය accounting standard එකේ තියෙන එක සුදුසු නොවෙන්න පුළුවන්. මොකද accounting standard එකක් කියන එක නිතර හදන එකක් නෙමෙයි. Accounting standards are not developed frequently. Okay, they are developed and it will be applied for a considerable time period, right? These accounting standards will not be revised or developed more frequently, more often. Developed in නැහැ. Once it is developed, it will be used for some time. Okay? But due to the uncertainty of the environment, okay, organizations or entities may find that accounting policies as per the accounting standards may not be appropriate to them. එලට සුදුසු නැති වෙනවා කියලා හිතෙන්න පුළුවන්. Now, in a case like that, in the absence of a recommended accounting policy in the accounting standard, the management, that is very important, right? The management of the entity should use its judgment in developing and applying the accounting policy, right? In the absence of the recommended accounting policy, or there are accounting policies but they are not suitable to our context or our entity. In that case, who is responsible? The management of the entity is responsible to use its judgment to develop and apply the accounting policy. Now, I told you that earlier that in the plantation industry, to value their harvest, okay, and their stocks, there may be some entity or industry specific accounting policies. Actually, there is a separate accounting standard for that sector. Plantation sector එකට වෙන මේකක් තියෙනවා. නමුත් සමහර අවස්ථාවල entity එකට එහෙම නැත්නම් ඒ industry එකට ගැලපෙන පරිදි accounting policy එක develop කරගන්න වෙයි. හරි? Another example is now I told you that we are facing to the crisis of COVID-19 pandemic, right? So think about a bank, commercial bank. Now in a commercial bank, loans and receivables, okay? In a commercial bank, loans and receivables is a very important asset, right? Loans and receivables. Now, usually assume that they are write off. අපි කියන්නේ බොල් ණය කියලා, bad debt. ඒකට අපි කියනවා impairment loss කියලා. bad debt එහෙම නැත්නම් write off කරන නැත්නම් impairment වෙන ප්‍රමාණය impairment percentage is usually say 10%, right? We allocate or we write off 10% of the loans and receivables as impairment loss. But due to this COVID-19 pandemic, businesses are facing a lot of difficulties to pay off its debts, and they are struggling with the business activities. Still, the demand has not been increased, right? So the businessmen or the customers face difficulties, right? Now, due to this development in the country and in the global market as well, the bank, say for example, decides to increase this increase in the sense the policy relating to the impairment loss should be changed. හරි. ඒතර මේක change කරන්න කියලා හිතෙන්න පුළුවන්. right? අර තියෙන එක suitable වෙන්න නැති වෙන්න පුළුවන්. එතකොට මේකේ මතක තියාගන්න in the absence of a recommended accounting policy, the management, that is very important, management is the responsible to use its judgment, professional judgment, to develop and apply accounting policy. Now, in this case, Lamai, management can't develop the accounting policies in ad hoc manner, right? They have to think about, or they have to link this with the conceptual framework. Now, you saw the qualitative characteristics of the conceptual framework. Mainly, we have relevance and faithful representation. Right? As well as to enhance these two primary qualitative characteristics, we have comparability, timeliness, verifiability, understandability. Right? Now, whenever the management develops accounting policies, they have to ensure that these qualitative characteristics are there in the developed accounting policy. Develop කරන accounting policy එකේ මේ qualitative characteristics ටික තියෙන්න ඕනේ. Relevance, faithful representation, comparability, timeliness, verifiability, and understandability. Okay, keep in mind. We'll go to the next slide. Once an entity selects an accounting policy, it should be applied consistently without frequent change. Okay, to similar transactions or other events or conditions. Consistently කියන එක වැදගත් ළමයි. හරි? වෙනස් කරන්නේ නැතුව. මොකද ස්ටෑන්ඩඩ් එක the standard, LKAS 8 encourages us to use the selected accounting policy without changing. Right? Without changing, we have to use the selected accounting policy. Say for example, in year 2015, say for example, we used FIFO. Okay, if so, 2016 also we have to use FIFO. 2017 again we have to use FIFO. Right? So consistency is there. I told you at the very first beginning, if the consistency is there, there is the comparability. We can compare because the same base. Okay? So usually, Lamai, the selected accounting policy should be applied consistently without changing for similar transactions, other events and conditions. Okay? Simply, without having a reasonable ground, you should not change the selected accounting policy. Okay, right. However, an entity can change an accounting policy. It doesn't say that never you can change an accounting policy. Accounting standard එක කියන්නේ නැහැ කවදාවත් ඔයාලට වෙනස් කරන්න බෑ කියලා. You can, but usually you have to apply the selected accounting policy consistently, usually. But in exceptional cases, you could change the selected accounting policy. Okay, first we will look at what is the change. මොකක්ද මේ change එක කියන්නේ? හරි? අපි දැක්කා accounting policy එකක් apply වුණා. Can you remember? recognition, measurement, and presentation. Right? I told you income recognition could be taken as an example for a situation where an accounting policy is applied to recognition. Okay, measurement like FIFO or WAC, presentation like classification of expenses or present in lease liability. Present in right of use asset. Right. So we learned that accounting policies are applied to recognition, measurement, and presentation of transactions and events. Right. Now, if there is a change in recognition or measurement basis or presentation, then that change is called as change of accounting policy. Particular transaction එකකට අදාළව recognition එක, measurement එක, presentation එක වෙනස් වෙනවා නම්, change වෙනවා නම් අන්න ඒකට කියනවා අපි change of accounting policies. Okay, say for example, earlier we were using FIFO method to measure the inventory. So it is a measurement basis. Okay, now we think that this should be changed to WAC. Now if we change from FIFO to WAC, the measurement basis or measurement of the inventory will be changed. So it is a change of accounting policy. Okay, assume that we were using income recognition different way, and due to the developments in the country and the global context, we think of change in the recognition of income recognition. Right? So the recognition changes. Right? Presentation අපි හිතමු දැනට අපි use කරන nature based classification එක. nature based. නමුත් අපි හිතනවා function based එකට යන්න ඕන කියලා. expenses classify කරද්දී. function based. එහෙම නැත්නම් අපි right of use asset එක දැනට PPE වලමයි carrying amount එක include කරන්නේ. දැන් අපි හිතනවා PPE වල include කරන්නේ නැතුව separate line item එකක් ලෙස right of use asset එක ගේන්න. අන්න ළමයි තේරෙන්න ඕනේ recognition, measurement basis, and presentation. If there's a change in recognition, measurement basis, and presentation of transaction or event, right, that change is called as change of accounting policies. Right? Okay. So we come to the next one, the same topic, change in accounting policy. Now I told you that this particular accounting standard encourages us or the entities to use the selected accounting policy consistently without changing. අපි දැක්ක 2015 FIFO, 16 FIFO, 17 FIFO. Without changing the accounting policy, you have to use the selected accounting policy consistently. The reason is, if you use the accounting policy consistently, there will be the comparability, then the decision usefulness will be high. Okay. However, it does not, in the sense the LKAS 8, the accounting standard does not say you cannot or you never change the accounting policy. එකෙන් කියන්නේ ඔයාට බැහැම කියලා. හරි? change කරන්න පුළුවන් අවස්ථා දෙකක් තියෙනවා. Okay, you can change an accounting policy in following two situations. Number one, now we discussed that accounting policy can be selected if there is an accounting standard which prescribes or which gives the guidelines about the accounting policies that can be used for a particular type of transaction. අපි කිව්වා accounting standard එකක් තියෙනවා නම් ඒ standard එකට අනුව තමයි ඒ transaction එකට අදාළව accounting policy එක තෝරගන්න ඕනේ කියලා. හරි? Now in some cases the accounting standard itself says that the current accounting policy should be changed. Okay, one classic example is, now before SLFR 16, okay, for leasing transaction we had LKAS 17 leases. you might have remember this because at your A levels you might have learned this LKAS 17 lease standard. But later on this was replaced by SLFRS 16 leases. Now this is a change in the accounting standard, right? Now if you can remember, as per the LKAS 17 leases, the previous standard, the lease liability, the lease asset was recognized at the lower of fair value or present value of minimum lease payment. ඔයාලට මතකයි නම් තිබුණා ඉස්සර ස්ටෑන්ඩඩ් එකට අනුව ඇසෙට් එක රෙකග්නයිස් කරන්න ඕනේ fair value එකට, එහෙම නැත්නම් minimum lease payments වල present value එක දෙකෙන් අඩුවකට. The lower of the fair value of the asset and the present value of minimum lease payment. But as per the new standard SLFRS 16, it has been changed. The asset is recognized initially at cost. Okay. Now, due to this change in the accounting standard, our accounting policy related to the particular transaction, should also be changed. එතකොට accounting standard එකක වෙනස් කරන්න කියලා කිව්වොත් එහෙම ඒ අනුව accounting policy එකත් වෙනස් කරන්න වෙයි. Okay? Now the selected accounting policy is required to change when an accounting standard specifically requires the change the accounting policy. Right? එතකොට අපි කැමති වුණත් නැති වුණත් accounting standard එක change වෙච්ච නිසා accounting policy එක change කරන්නම වෙනවා. It is a must, compulsory. Okay, no option, we have to change. Now say for example අපි හිතමු LKAS 2 එකේ imagine that FIFO method will be abolished in future. Okay, assume this is an assumption. If LKAS 2 will abolish the FIFO method in future, if we are using FIFO method, right? If the accounting standard has been changed to abolish the FIFO method, definitely we have to change our accounting policy from FIFO to WACC. එනිසා change එකක් කරන පළවෙනි අවස්ථාව තමයි accounting standard එකකින් specifically කියනවා change කරන්න කියලා. එහෙනම් no option to the entity, they have to change. Number 2, now you can remember that in the absence of accounting standard, right, the management of the entity was able to use its professional judgment to develop and apply accounting policy. Right? එතකොට accounting standard එකකින් කියන්නේ නැතුව accounting policy එකක් develop කරගන්නත් පුළුවන්. ඒ වගේ මෙතන change එකට ආවට පස්සේ when we come to the change, right? Now the accounting standard is silent. I mean it does not require the change the accounting policy. Accounting policy එක වෙනස් කරන්න කියලා standard එකේ කියන්නේ නැහැ. හැබැයි I told you that we are facing in a very dynamic or changing environment, right? Due to the changes happening in the environment, right? The management thinks that the selected accounting policy should be changed. For example, අපි හිතමු as per LKAS 2 inventory standard, right? We can use FIFO weighted average. Okay, still these two alternatives are there. Assume that we were using FIFO. Now due to the changes in the environment and dynamic environment and the contingencies and uncertainties in the environment, the management thinks that if we change the inventory valuation from FIFO to WACC, it will provide more relevant information and faithful representation about the financial position, financial performance and cash flows. Make a වෙනස් කිරීම නිසා more relevant. more reliable and relevant information provide කරන්න පුළුවන් නම් මොනවා සම්බන්ධයෙන්ද? entities financial position, financial performance and cash flows. මතක ඇති මම කිව්වා objectives of financial statements is to provide the information to the interested parties about an entity's financial position, financial performance and cash flows. Right? Now, if the management thinks that the change in the accounting policy will result providing more reliable and more relevant information about the entity's financial position, financial performance and cash flows, then the management has the ability to change the accounting policy. Look at Lamai in broader picture, right? Now, more relevant and more relevant, more reliable and more relevant information දෙන්න accounting policy එකක් වෙනස් කරන්න ඕන නම් එතෙන්දී management එකට වෙනස් කරන්න පුළුවන්. එතකොට මේ change කරපු accounting policy එක නිසා ඔයාලගේ financial position එක, financial performance එක සහ cash flows more reliable ලෙස නැත්නම් more relevant ලෙස ඉදිරිපත් කරන්න පුළුවන්. Ultimately what will happen? The decision usefulness will be enhanced or increased. Right? So due to this change of the accounting policy, you can provide reliable and more relevant information about the financial position, financial performance and cash flows. What will happen ultimately? It will increase the decision usefulness of the information. Okay, simply lamai, the standard says no selected accounting policy should be used consistently without changing. That is the general rule. But there is an exception. You can change. What do you mean by change? Change in the measurement, change in the recognition, change in the presentation. Okay, so you can change an accounting policy in these two situations. Number one, accounting standard relevant to that accounting policy specifically says that the selected accounting policy should be changed. Then no option, entity has to change the accounting policy. The second situation, accounting standard does not say to change, but the management thinks that if the change is done, it will provide reliable and more relevant information about the entity's financial position, financial performance and cash flows, right? Then it in the sense the management can change the accounting policy. Okay. Now, apart from these two situations, the entity cannot change an accounting policy. But in these two situations, the management or the entity can change the accounting policy. Now, let's look at what is the accounting treatment for the changes in accounting policies. Right? එතකොට අපි දැක්ක මුල සිටම accounting standard එකකිනුත් accounting policy එකක් පිළිබඳ prescriptions නැත්නම් guidelines ලැබෙනවා. එහෙම නැති අවස්ථාවේ management එකත් accounting policy එකක් develop කරන අවස්ථා තියෙනවා. Okay, right from the beginning we saw that accounting standards specifies accounting policies to be adapted by the entity. In the absence of accounting standard, the management can develop its own accounting policies. So we saw these two branches right from the beginning. Okay, change එකෙත් අපි දැක්කා. change එකේදීත් අපි කිව්වා accounting standard එකෙන් change කරනවා නම් අපිට change කරන්න වෙනවා. එහෙම නැත්නම් accounting standard එකේ change නොවුනත් management එකේ තියෙනවා නම් reliable සහ more relevant information provide කරන්න පුළුවන් change එකකින් කියලා ඒත් change කරන්න පුළුවන්. ඔය situations දෙක තමයි කිව්වේ. Then බලමු how to account for the changes in accounting policies. Right? Now, if an accounting standard specifically requires change in the accounting policy, now this branch, right? Accounting standard specifically requires changing accounting policy, right? Usually, lamai, in this situation, the new accounting standard will provide the effective date, or we call it as transitional provision. අර මාරු වෙන කාලච්ඡේදය ගැන කියනවා. Right? Should account for the change in accordance with the specific transitional provisions of the relevant standard. Okay. Now, say for example, earlier the standard for leasing was LKAS 17, but SLFR 16 came into place, right? In that case, the new recognition measurement criteria uh, will be applied depending on the effective date of SLFR 16. Correct? I can't remember the exact date. Somewhere in 2020, maybe earlier than that. I can't remember the exact effective date. ඒ අලුත් ප්‍රමිතියේ effective date එකක් කියනවා. මෙදා සිට මේක අනුගමනය කරන්න. With effect from this date, the new change will be applied. Right? ඒක තමයි අපි කියන්නේ transitional provisions කියලා. ඒ මාරුව වෙන කාලච්ඡේදයට අනුව තමයි account කරන්න ඕනේ. Right? So basically ළමයි if an accounting standard specifically requires change in the accounting policy, now as I have noticed, the transitional provision is given in the relevant accounting standard, that is prospectively. ඒ කියන්නේ අනාගතයේ ඉඳලා තමයි මේක බොහෝ විට implement වෙන්නේ. ඒ කියන්නේ change එක account වෙන්නේ අනාගතයට බලපාන පරිදි prospectively, as I have noticed. effective date එක අනුව කියලා ගන්න සාමාන්‍යයෙන් මේක effective වෙන්නේ අතීතයට බලපාන පරිදි නෙමෙයි, මේක බොහෝ විට වර්තමානයේ ඉඳලා අනාගතයට යනවා. With effect from this date. Okay? We come to the second situation, that is situation number 2. I will come like this. If the change is made by the entity voluntarily. මම කිව්වේ ඕනනම් management එකට පුළුවන්, management can change the accounting policy if that change results providing reliable and more relevant information about the entity's financial position, financial performance and cash flows. ඒතර ඒ වගේ අවස්ථාවක entity එකේ management එකට voluntarily ඒ කියන්නේ ස්වේච්ඡාවෙන් ඒ accounting policy එක change කරන්න පුළුවන්. If the change is made by the entity voluntarily. Now in that case, the accounting treatment is retrospective application. That is very important. Retrospective application. The meaning of retrospective application is, okay, we assume that the new accounting policy had always been applied. The new accounting policy had always been applied. ඒ කියන්නේ අතීතයේ සිට අපි අලුත් accounting policy එක apply කළා කියලා හිතනවා. Retrospective application. Right? See, the application of the new accounting policy to transactions and other events as if that policy had always been applied. ඒක හැමදාම අතීතයේ සිට භාවිතා කළා යයි සිතලා account කිරීම තමයි retrospective application කියලා කියන්නේ. Right? So this should be very clear lamai. If an accounting standard says to change an accounting policy, the accounting standard itself gives the effective date. We call it as transitional provision. Now based on the effective date or the transitional provision, we have to account the change of accounting policy. බොහෝ විට ඒක prospectively එන්නේ. ඒ කියන්නේ current and future period එකට බලපාන පරිදි. But the second case, if the change is made by the entity voluntarily, I mean by the management to provide reliable and more relevant information, right? Then the accounting treatment is retrospective application. The meaning of the retrospective application is we assume that the new accounting policy had always been applied. හැම වෙලේම apply කරා කියලා අපි හදන්න ඕන. Now if you can remember, in the previous session I told you under the components of the full set of financial statements. Now for easy reference, I have taken that slide again. මම මේක ගත්තේ නැවත previous session එකෙන් මේක ලේසි වෙන්න. ඔයාලට මතකද මම කිව්වා as per the LKAS 1 complete set of financial statements consist of 7 components. Number 1 is statement of financial position. Statement of financial position, statement of profit or loss and other comprehensive income, statement of changes in equity, statement of cash flows, notes, and comparative information. I told you these 6 components are must. අනිවාර්යයෙන්ම හදන්න ඕනේ. And can you remember I told you when there is a policy change, okay, when there is a policy change, right? When you account that for retrospectively අතීතයට බලපාන පරිදි එක change කරනවා නම් you have to present financial position at the beginning of the earliest comparative period. When there is a policy change which should be accounted retrospectively අතීතයට බලපාන පරිදි you have to present another financial position at the beginning of the earliest comparative year or period, right? So this is that situation when the entity or when the management of the entity changes an accounting policy to provide reliable and more relevant information about the financial position, performance and cash flows. The accounting treatment is retrospective application. The meaning of retrospective application, again I am telling, we assume that the new accounting policy had always been applied, right? Now in a case like that, in the retrospective application you have to present financial position at the beginning of the comparative year. ඒ කියන්නේ දැන් current year එක 2020 නම් comparative year එක 2000, take like this, 2020 is the current year, right? 31st March 2020. Then comparative year is uh, 31st March 2019, right? Then the beginning of the comparative year, you have to present another statement of financial position when beginning of the comparative year, that is as at April 2018. So financial positions තුනක් එනවා. current year එකේ අග දවසට එනවා, previous year එකේ අග දවසට එනවා, previous year එකේ beginning date එකට එනවා. 3. Right? So I have taken the same extracts from a previous session, same extracts. You see, this is current year 2013, this is comparative year, and as at 1st April 2011 you have presented another statement of financial position when there is a retrospective application, accounting policy retrospective. I think that is clear. Okay, in summary lamai, accounting policies are very important. They provide guidelines, general guidelines to prepare and present consistent financial statements. If the consistency is there, we can compare. Ultimately what will happen, the decision usefulness will be increased.